welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are completely flipping how you look at writing. You see, grammar isn't some rigid set of academic rules just meant to torture you. Honestly, it's more like a master craftsman's toolbox. It's exactly what you use to build crystal clear clarity and serious impact into every single sentence you write.
You know, a single keystroke literally changes everything. Just look at this classic, slightly absurd example. Let's eat grandma versus let's eat grandma. That one tiny little mark is the literal difference between a pleasant family dinner invitation and an absolute disaster. It just perfectly shows us exactly why these structural tools matter so much. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our blueprint for today's explainer. First up, sentence architecture. Second, we'll look at verbs as our action engine. Third, precision with nouns and pronouns. And finally, punctuation, the final polish. Having this map in mind should keep us from getting overwhelmed by any of the grammatical jargon.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Sentence Architecture and Clauses.
Think of clauses as the structural foundation of a building. You obviously can't put up walls or a roof until you have a solid foundation, right? Well, you can't build a strong paragraph without mastering clauses. A clause is the absolute basic building block of any sentence. It's simply a unit of language containing exactly one subject and one predicate. Every single sentence you ever write needs at least one clause. But notice the difference here. Independent clauses can stand entirely on their own to express a complete thought, whereas dependent clauses cannot. They absolutely rely on an independent partner to make any sense. So depending on how we stack these fundamental blocks, we get 4 distinct ways to architect our thoughts. A simple sentence has just one independent clause. A compound sentence hooks 2 or more independent clauses together. A complex sentence mixes one independent clause with 1 or more dependent clauses. And finally, the compound complex sentence combines at least 2 independent clauses with dependent ones. Honestly, it's kind of like upgrading from a one-room cabin to a sprawling multi-room mansion.
But you might be wondering, how do we actually connect all these rooms? Well, that brings us to conjunctions, the glue of your sentence architecture. We have our coordinating conjunctions, which you might know by the famous fanboys acronym, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Then we have correlative conjunctions, and those work in pairs, like either or. And finally, subordinating conjunctions, like because or although, that introduce those dependent clauses we just talked about. Now, here's a quick pro tip. Beginning a sentence with a coordinating conjunction like and or but is totally 100% grammatically valid, despite what your middle school teacher might have told you. However, it definitely creates a less formal tone, so just be aware of your audience when you pull out that trick.
Moving right along to our second section, verbs, the action engine. We've got our foundation built, so now we need to power the whole shebang. Verbs really drive the energy and the pacing of your entire sentence. Consider this comparison. The essay was graded by the teacher versus the teacher graded the essay. That first one is in the passive voice, and it just feels sluggish, doesn't it? The action is happening to the subject, but look what happens when we move the performer of the action, the teacher, right into the subject position. The teacher graded the essay. Instantly, the sentence transforms from sluggish passive voice into clear, concise, active voice. It's direct, and it's super punchy. Okay, just between you and me, if you want the real secret to fixing wordy or confusing sentences, you've got to understand verbals. Verbals are verb forms that are actually functioning as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs in a sentence. We're talking about gerunds, participles, and infinitives. Identifying these verbs in disguise is practically a superpower for tightening up your prose. Let's see exactly why this matters. Read the first one here. The team improved clarity by editing the report. I mean, it's structurally okay, sure, but relying on that ing gerund makes it a little heavy and indirect. Now look at the revision. The team edited the report to improve clarity. By converting that chain of gerunds into a direct finite verb, edited, the writing immediately becomes so much punchier. This next one always cracks me up a bit. Rowing across the river, the boat struck the ice. Well, unless you have some sort of magical self-rowing boat, this is your classic dangling participle error. The modifying participle phrase doesn't logically connect to any subject, so it actually sounds like the boat itself is doing the rowing. The revision underneath fixes this beautifully. As we rowed across the river, the boat struck the ice. Now, the action is logically connected to the right subject, and the sentence actually makes total sense. All right, jumping right into Section 3, precision with nouns and pronouns. So if verbs are the engine, nouns and pronouns, They're the steering wheel. This is where we hone our precision and really focus our emphasis. And this brings us to the eternal question, who or whom? I know, this is notoriously tricky for so many writers, but don't panic. I'm going to give you a foolproof way to know the exact right answer every single time.
To solve this, you just use the memory check. When you're trying to figure out if you should use who or whom, try answering the question with a personal pronoun. If the pronoun functions as an object or the object of a preposition, you'll use the objective case. For instance, if the question is, whom do you trust? Answer it in your head. You would naturally say, I trust him. The him test guarantees you get it right. If you would naturally answer with him, use whom. If the answer is he, you use who. It really is as simple as that.
Now what about indefinite pronoun agreement? Indefinite pronouns fall into 3 distinct buckets: always singular, always plural, and variable. Words like anybody and everyone always take a singular verb. But the variable ones, words like all, none, and some, depend entirely on the context. For example, if you write, none of the cake was eaten, well, it takes a singular verb because cake is an uncountable quantity. But if you write, none of the cookies were eaten, it takes a plural verb because cookies are totally countable. So always make sure you're matching your agreement to the context. Let's shift gears to a really fascinating structural tool, the expletive it. Actually, let me clarify right away that this is not the personal pronoun it that refers back to a specific noun, like a dog or a car. Nope, this is a placeholder word. It basically holds the subject position temporarily, delaying the true subject until later in the sentence.
Let's see this in action. Take a look at the first version. To trust him is difficult. The true subject is that nominal infinitive phrase, to trust him, and putting it right at the front makes the whole sentence feel a bit front-heavy. But look at the second version. It is difficult to trust him. By inserting the expletive it, we shift that heavy phrase all the way to the end. It beautifully alters the cadence and smooths out the rhythm of the sentence without changing the meaning at all. And that brings us to our final section, Section 4, Punctuation, the Final Polish. Listen to this structural collision right here. The project was delayed, the team was frustrated. Consider this your official warning against the dreaded comma splice. You literally cannot just jam 2 independent clauses together with a comma. It's a structural car crash. Now hear the fix. The project was delayed, and the team was frustrated. Simply adding the coordinating conjunction and instantly fixes the collision. It creates a smooth, fully legal transition between those 2 independent thoughts.
So what about semicolons and colons? People mix these up all the time, but their functions are actually very distinct. A semicolon joins closely related independent clauses without a conjunction. It creates a smooth, logical transition between 2 equal ideas. A colon, on the other hand, introduces lists, examples, or explanations. Just remember, a colon must follow a complete independent clause. Think of a colon almost like a drum roll that announces the arrival of important supporting details. Ultimately, punctuation marks are essentially the visual rhythm, the musical notation of your writing. They tell the reader exactly when to pause, when to stop, and how to feel the flow of your words. As the quote here says, punctuation is functional, not decorative. That is absolutely crucial. This is a core rule you should always remember. You don't just sprinkle commas around like confetti because they look nice. Every single mark is an essential tool for establishing pacing and tone. In fact, one of the best editorial tricks out there is to read your text aloud. Doing this helps you check your natural cadence, and you will literally hear where a comma, a period, or a dash actually belongs. So we'll wrap up today's explainer with a question for you. How will you wield your new editorial toolbox to sharpen your next piece of writing? I really challenge you to look at your own writing moving forward, not as some chore to get through, but as a structure to be expertly crafted and polished. You have the tools now, the foundational clauses, the active verbs, the precise pronouns, and the musical punctuation. So go build something amazing. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep crafting those perfect sentences.